Chinese writer Ma Jian says Taikun reversal a victory against censorship. And U.S. and China have blunt exchanges on South China Sea and other security issues.
Good evening. Chinese dissident writer Ma Jian says Taikun's earlier refusal to host his talks was done out of self-censorship and ignorance. But he hailed the failure of self-censorship after the Arts Hub made a dramatic reversal last night and agreed to host the author. Christy Lung with details.
Talks featuring Ma Jian continued as planned at Taikun. However, things weren't going so well 2 days ago when the Arts Hub suddenly refused to host Ma's events. A spokesman for Taikun said they didn't want the place to become a platform to promote political interests of any individual. Speaking to reporters this morning, Ma said the decision was made out of self-censorship and ignorance. Judging a novelist by singling out the political elements in his works is an act of ignorance of that person, said Ma. It is a failure of self-censorship, said Ma. The festival organizer refused to give further details of their discussions with Taikun and tobacco venue Nanfang.
We're here to focus this morning on Mr. Ma's writing after the festival, and any questions you have at Taikun, I refer you to Taikun.
The author added he felt disappointed upon arrival as he learned 2 venues barred his talks. Still, he believed the government wasn't involved in the row as he had no problem going through immigration holding a British passport. Meanwhile, Chief Executive Carrie Lam claimed she knew nothing about it. I only learned about the incident after it is reported, Lam said this morning. She stressed that the government had no control over decisions made by venue operators and reiterated that freedom of speech and expression are protected under the Basic Law. Christy Lung, TVB News.
Chief Executive Carrie Lam has dismissed speculation that she is poised to replace Chief Secretary Matthew Chung. According to media reports, Chung's position and a cabinet reshuffle are on the agenda during her Beijing visit. Kana Chu reports.
This morning, the chief executive led a delegation headed for the mainland to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the reform and opening up of the country. Ahead of her departure, she was questioned whether she was going to have discussions with the central government on replacing Chief Secretary for Administration Matthew Chung. This as rumors have emerged that the SCR's number 2 official could be removed in a government restructuring plan. Carrie Lam maintained that the visit to Beijing will solely be for celebration purposes. She added there would not be any chance for her to meet privately with the country's top leadership anyway. Setting off from the central government offices, the delegation first arrived at Shenzhen. There they visited the Shenzhen Reform and Opening Up Exhibition Hall. The delegates comprised of 163 notable persons from various sectors. Half of them are aged over 66, with the oldest being 94-year-old Tim Lam, founder of the toy company Ford Winsome Industries. They were all chosen based on the significant contributions they made to China's reform and opening up and to the SAR. In the afternoon, the delegation reached Qianhai for the Qianhai Exhibition Hall and the park of the Qianhai Monument. Tomorrow in Beijing, they will take part in a seminar co-organized by the National Development and Reform Commission and the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office. They will be received by the state leaders on Monday and return to Hong Kong in the afternoon on the same day. Ina Chu, TVB News.
The U.S. and China have been pushing back at each other over several differences during high-level talks in Washington. China bluntly told the United States to stop sending ships and military aircraft close to the islands that Beijing claims in the South China Sea, while the U.S. says it will continue to sail in international waters. Alan Booknev reports.
The talks between the 2 countries' top diplomats and military leaders is to set the stage for a meeting between President Xi Jinping and U.S. President Donald Trump later this month. One issue was disputed islands in the South China Sea that China lays claim to, and an incident in which a Chinese destroyer sailed close to an American warship, which the U.S. Navy called an unsafe and unprofessional maneuver.
南海局势总体趋稳向好。
The Director of Foreign Affairs, Yang Jiechi, said China made it clear that the U.S. should stop sending its vessels and aircraft close to these islands and stop actions that undermine Chinese authority.
Through candid discussions, we sought ways to lessen tension, maintain open lines of communication between our militaries, and reduce the risk of miscalculation. And we made clear that the United States will continue to fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows.
The two sides also discussed the dispute that's seen tit-for-tat tariffs over what the U.S. says are unfair Chinese trade practices. Despite the frank airing of their differences, both sides stressed the need to tamp down tensions.
The United States seeks a constructive, results-oriented relationship with China grounded in fairness, reciprocity, and respect. Personal relationships of trust and candor will go a long way in achieving these ends.
中美两军应进一步的加强
Defense Minister Wei Fenghe agreed the two sides need to set up strategic trust, saying confrontation and conflict will spell disaster for all. These talks were supposed to be held in Beijing last month, but were postponed after Washington announced new arms sales to Taiwan. Pompeo said the U.S. will maintain its ties with Taiwan and criticized Beijing's efforts to isolate the island. Alan Booknia, TVB News.
British Transport Minister Joe Johnson has stepped down to protest Prime Minister Theresa May's Brexit plan.
We are barreling towards an incoherent Brexit that is going to leave us trapped in a subordinate relationship to the EU, with no say over the rules that will govern huge swathes of our economy. This is completely unacceptable and unsustainable for a proud democracy such as our own. In fact, so great is the gulf now between what was promised in the referendum campaign and what is now on offer in the Prime Minister's proposed deal that I have had no choice but to submit my resignation.
Johnson is also backing calls for a second referendum on whether the country should leave. The younger brother of former Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson says it would not be a rerun of the 2016 poll. He says it would give the public a chance to vote again because of the way Brexit negotiations have evolved. While his brother Boris was a staunch supporter of Brexit, Joe Johnson backed the Remain side in 2016. This latest development further complicates matters for Theresa May. This as she tries to strike a deal with the EU that will pass with her cabinet and win backing in Parliament.
At least 11 people have been killed by flash floods caused by heavy rains in Jordan. Searches for missing people continue. About 24 were hurt and dozens more evacuated from their homes. Hundreds of tourists were forced to seek higher ground in Petra. That's an ancient trading hub carved into rose-colored rock. Yesterday's floods come just 2 weeks after 21 people, mostly middle school students, were killed in a flash flood near the Jordanian shore by the Red Sea.
And coming up in our newscast, officials expect more people than ever to use Mega Bridge as Tungchung bears the brunt of tourist crowds. We'll tell you why Trump called a CNN reporter stupid.
香港地乜都要快，做生意要成功，唔止資金流要夠快，仲要轉數要快，先至可以突圍而出。
做網店最緊要嘅個現金流啦。
商業客戶經恒生用轉數快，顧客用手機號碼、email address 或者 FPS ID 就可以即時過數俾商戶，就算跨銀行都得。
收錢又快，梗係個個都中意啦。
啱晒我哋需要現金流嘅中小企。
無論你做邊行，做生意就係咁簡單。即刻經恒生商業網上理財，用轉數快，商業客戶唔只有100蚊現金回贈，仲有機會贏取旗艦手機喎。
Welcome back to TVB News. The government is expecting traveler numbers on the mega bridge to Macau and Zhuhai to reach another new high this weekend. Still, many tourists continue to head to Tongcheng despite complaints about overcrowding there. Caleb Bloom reports.
It's been a day after the government introduced new measures to better manage traveler numbers at the bridge. This includes suggesting that tourists not go to Tongcheng and instead head to Sunny Bay as a transfer station. The fare on the B5 bus would be $3 cheaper. But many passengers are still opting to take the B6 bus that runs between Tongcheng and the port area. This tourist says he's going to Tongcheng because he already bought the bus ticket. He would have considered Sunny Bay if he had known about the cheaper deal. This tour manager from Zhongshan also discouraged tour members to go anywhere other than Tongcheng. She said her tour only has 5 hours for sightseeing, so other parts of Hong Kong are too far away. But another measure, which targets non-franchised bus operators who wish to pick up passengers at a port during weekends, seems to have had some effect. Instead of registering with the authorities 3 days in advance, they now only have to do so before 5 p.m. each Friday. This mainland tour manager said his tour members could now board the coach directly at the port instead of going to Tongcheng first. There were also police officers at the port to check local tour guides for their licenses. That's after some expressed concern about mainland tour groups that were not received by local travel agents. Many complained that these illicit tour groups were responsible for the recent overcrowding in Tongcheng. Caleb Bloom, TVB News.
And despite measures to divert bridge travelers away from Tongcheng, residents are not convinced they will be effective. Our Pinky Wong with that story.
Tongcheng continues to be the popular spot for tourists that arrive from the mainland via the mega bridge. New measures are trying to divert tourists to Sunny Bay instead of using Tongcheng as a way into Hong Kong. But it doesn't seem to be working for some residents.
And there's nothing to do in Sunny Bay. Definitely, it's gotten a lot more crowded. I know the lines in the supermarket are a lot longer and, well, restaurants are fuller, and just in general, it's a lot more stressful. And everyone has a right to be here too. It's just something that you have to adjust.
Government statistics say some 3,000 visitors coming via the bridge are going through Tongcheng daily. Shoppers packed in stores, queues gathered around the cable car station. Some even had their lunch standing in connecting walkways between malls.
Multiple barricades have been set up at the Tongcheng bus stop to organize the crowd taking the bus back to the Hong Kong port.
While Tongcheng residents are trying to cope with the crowds, some visitors were happy with the arrangements.
Overall arrangement is good with the satisfaction. It could be a little bit better.
Authorities say they have acted on public concerns on mainland tour groups not received by local travel agents, which violates the rules. Police officers were deployed to check tour guides' IDs and travel agent license. Groups concerning Tongcheng residents' livelihoods protested at the bus station to the Hong Kong port. When District Councillor Roy Tam tried to question suspected illicit tour groups as they got on the bus, police had to step in to settle the dispute. Pinky Wong, TVB News.
A hiker who fell unconscious in Shengshui has died. The man in his 50s was rushed to Pamela Yude Nethersole Eastern Hospital for treatment. He was later pronounced dead. Police received a report at around 12:30 p.m. about the man who fell unconscious along the Lang Choi Hung Country Trail. He was hiking with 7 other people at the time.
Overseas again, and instead of using Australian citizenship to do good things, a terrorist killed 1 man after stabbing a total of 3 men. That from Australia's Prime Minister, who insists religious leaders need to help stop residents from becoming radicalized.
A lone, violent, extremist Islamic terrorist, Hassan Khalif Shah Ali, sought to instill fear in our nation. A fellow Australian who was felled in our streets by another Australian who had violated the trust and the opportunity gifted to him by a generous nation. There is a special responsibility on religious leaders to protect their religious communities and to ensure that dangerous teachings and ideologies do not take root here.
The attack occurred at a mall in Melbourne on Friday. That's when Shahar Ali went on a stabbing spree inspired by ISIS. His brother is currently in custody on charges for allegedly planning his own ISIS-inspired attack. For the record, ISIS has claimed responsibility for this stabbing. U.S. President Donald Trump had another angry encounter with reporters before heading out to France to commemorate the end of World War I. Our Tony Sabine reports.
After his dramatic verbal clash with CNN reporter Jim Acosta this week, U.S. President Donald Trump had a run-in with another journalist. This time, it was Acosta's CNN colleague Abby Phillip, who was asked whether the president wanted his new acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker to rein in Special Counsel Robert Mueller on the Russia probe.
Do you expect Matt Whitaker to be involved in the Russia probe? Do you want him to...
It's up to him.
Do you want him to rein in Robert Mueller?
What a stupid question that is. What a stupid question. But I watch you a lot. You ask a lot of stupid questions.
Trump also had another go at Acosta, saying the controversy over an intern trying to grab the mic away from the reporter was overblown. He also defended the White House decision to revoke Acosta's press pass.
I think Jim Acosta is a very unprofessional man. I think he does this with everybody. He gets paid to do that. You know, he gets paid to burst in. He's a very unprofessional guy. When you're in the White House, this is a very sacred place to me. This is a very special place. You have to treat the White House with respect. You have to treat the presidency with respect.
Trump then headed off to Paris and will join an international commemoration this weekend of the 100th anniversary of the armistice that ended World War I. Tony Sabine, TVB News.
And that is our news for tonight.
Good night.